So to the panelists, in any order, and please argue and make fun of each other, I like that. How do sources get to you?
First of all, you have funny pants. Secondly,
well, thank you. You have good pants.
It's interesting that you mentioned press releases because I get about 600 emails a day.
Right.
And so, kind of deciphering which ones to even read is a tough call. I will scan, first of all, for people I know, and then secondly, for maybe issues and topics I know. And if I can recognize the fact that it's a chain or it's a mass email, then I won't even look at it. And that's just the way it is. And I think, granted, my job as an individual journalist is just to find things that I'm personally interested in. So it doesn't mean that your press release will not be seen, but we have an assignment desk who is going to scan through press releases and make a determination of something that they need to cover. So don't let me, get you to stop doing press releases. I'm just saying that what I'm going to look for is something that's going to really stick out. And if it's a press release, I'm not going to read it. I'm a believer in individual relationships. I'm a believer in getting to know people, and then it's through these people that I meet out and about on the streets. And then when they pitch a story to me, I'm a lot more apt to listen to it, especially if that story is really interesting and I feel like readers are going to be able to relate to that and find it interesting. And it's usually through what we call personalizing a story. If you have a specific event,
right.
let's say it's Miss Chinatown. I'm just kind of grabbing on things, and you have a particularly interesting person who has overcome a lot, who might be a contestant or might be a past winner, and that can tell a bigger story than we could tell her story. But at the same time, what they're learning about is the event itself. But they're learning about that event through an individual story, and then that's what I'm looking for. That's where I'm trying to, make the determination whether that individual story is worthy of our viewers.
That's a good point, because you talk about personalizing, and I want to get the view from the other panelists clearly, but if you look at the front page of the New York Times, above the fold, upper right-hand corner, enslaving young girls, the Islamic State builds a vast system of rape. The first line, to your point here, reads, "In the moments before he raped the 12-year-old girl, the Islamic State fighter," very personal, talks about the girl, gives us the exact detail and who the actor is, to your point. Very personal.
I think David hit at the heart of every story. It's about humans, no matter what the issue is, or the crime, or the event of the day. And if you don't have a face, or a group, or a community to connect your story to, there's no story.
For me, I'm kind of sitting on this panel, but in a different space. AAJA is a blog, but we're non-traditional media. So we don't go out and send reporters to cover events. So what we do write about things, and there's a couple of ways to reach us and a couple of ways for us to cover you, but also there's ways to cover yourself. If you want us to write about it, it goes back to the individual relationship. More likely than not, if I have no idea who you are, I'm not even going to pay attention to the email. I don't know who you are. I don't know what this is. It's got to sound really, really cool or amazing, and it's really hard to kind of cut through all of that. So it goes back to the individual relationship, and I know David actually is really good about this. For somebody who is as high profile as he is, he's always out at community events and he's engaging and talking to people. And for me, that's one of the ways that I find stories, is going out in the community, talking to people, getting to know what they're working on. So it's not just when the email lands, I kind of have an idea of who they are and what they work on. The other way that you can, quote unquote, get coverage on a site like ours is that you can literally write your own story. We do allow guest blogs. A lot of outlets do not. To give a little context, I know there's some Asian American orgs here. Within the Asian American blog space, there's really not that many of us who've been around for many years. The biggest and baddest of us all is Angry Asian Man, who, by the way, is also an AAJA LA member and here in San Francisco.
Toot that horn.
But so he's probably got the most traffic. But he's his site is known to be his. It's his site. He has guest posts too. But I would say it's a little bit more than newsy and curational in terms of how he covers the Asian American world. And he's a must-read. If you're not reading Angry Asian Man, you don't know what's going on in Asian America. But with Asians, we're slightly different. There's 8 of us who started the site, and we are all about personal opinions and personal stories. So going back to what Ann was saying, we don't really want to just hear the who, what, when, where, why, which is what and how, what the journalists are supposed to be covering. We want to hear the backstory. We want to hear what maybe we don't see or hear any place else. So for us, we really try to have an angle of even opinions and and just behind the scenes and that sort of thing to really take people inside the community in a way that maybe media would never cover us.
I wanted to add a quick thing. I engage mainly by email and I respond to quite a lot. I have a 24-hour rule in general if I'm in town to get back an answer to you within a day. We get a lot of crazy, unsolicited email. I get all sorts of materials on equine coverage, and because of my Twitter handle @NewsTerrier, I get every animal on earth. It's fun, but it's also time-consuming. I don't respond much to Twitter messages, but I prefer email.
So to you, Ann, and then to the rest of the panelists, what is a recent story that struck a chord for you? That really was like, this is a good one.
Well, I'll talk about a story.
Yeah.
And this is one that we didn't write, but we've been covering the story of this band, this Asian American band called the Slants. And they tried to file the trademark, and they got rejected multiple times. And this story, I don't know if some of you have heard of it, but this band has tried multiple times to get the trademark of the Slants. And the U.S. Patent Office said, well, this is a racist term. You can't trademark it. Whereas, if you were non-Asian and you tried to trademark something, the Slants, you could get this patent, or the trademark. So that is actually, it's the root of the racism. So this is actually a big thing in the community because there are actually Asian American orgs who don't think they should be able to get the trademark. So it's very complex. And for us in the Asian American community, we're already kind of invisible from the mainstream publication perspective. So there's these things that are so nuanced and so complicated. And it shows like the diversity within the Asian American community. We're not all the same. We don't even agree on this one issue. And so
you liked it for the nuance.
I loved it for the nuance, but more importantly, I had a relationship with the lead, the lead from the band, and he had previously written about the struggles of looking to get this trademark. And so recently, not just the decision came down that was against them, but also there was multiple Asian American orgs that filed an amicus brief saying, we're against this too. And so he felt like, I'm like trying to do something for the community and the community is attacking me. So I gave him a platform to write about what it's like to, he said basically, I'm not the floodgates of racism that everybody thinks I am. I'm not here to try to be racist. So I gave him a platform to talk and really, write a long form piece about what it was like to go through this and what it was like to get this ruling done.
There was a story in the New York Times about a year and a half ago, and it talked about the rise of Asians in philanthropy and the multi-million-dollar donations. Some of the local philanthropic groups in the LA area approached us about, hey, we're local, can you do something highlighting us? And I talked about them, learned what they do, but my editors were not interested. They thought, this is kind of almost too inside baseball. And I thought it was a great idea, so I filed that away and reintroduced the idea about a year later. A focus on giving circles. And the angle was, you don't have to be Bill Gates to help out your community. You can donate at any dollar amount, and then we recruit more people to replicate your actions, and then the circle expands. And so we wrote about that, and it got huge response.
So that is like you followed away, you waited for the right timing, and then boop, you hit it.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just a timing. If it's an evergreen topic, it may not work as the flavor of the month this month, but you can repitch it. Maybe your editors will change, or maybe there'll be a different news cycle.
Cool. And again, our panelists are award-winning, and the one at the end, how many different Emmys do we have now? Is it half of one? Is it half? Half an Emmy.
I just got the base, but they haven't given me the rest of it.
Right. 20 Emmys, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about a story, and clearly one of those Emmy Award-winning stories were your favorites, but pick any one you like.
Well, I just did a story last week. I mean, it's obviously not an award winner, but I love the way it came out. I traveled to Japan and I did this story on the anniversary of the Hiroshima bomb, the atomic bomb. But why I think that's relevant to you is on the train while I was in Japan, traveling down to Hiroshima, I opened up a magazine and I read an article about this particular dish called okonomiyaki, which is particularly unique to this one city of Hiroshima. And I thought that instead of presenting this story that is so dark and gloomy, and everybody knows what you're going to get when you talk about an atomic bomb, instead I kind of went the other direction, and I started the story with this dish that has taken over the city. And the city's becoming known for this particular kind of food, as opposed to being known for the victim of an atomic bomb. And so that's how I lured people in to this story, and I really liked the way it came out, and I had a lot of positive feedback from the public. And the reason I think it's relevant to you is, a lot of people want to hit that home run. They want to get their story in front of a huge audience, maybe on a big network, in an LA Times or something like that, but sometimes going small is better. If this article in this small magazine was not in there, I would never have known about okonomiyaki. I would never have been able to go profile that restaurant. So sometimes going small or smaller, where you can have more of that interpersonal relationship with somebody like Jaws, who can expose what you want to talk about, and then somebody may see that on Jaws's blog, and then it might continue to go. It's kind of like a grassroots effort to get your information out there. You don't have to hit that home run right off the bat. Sometimes it's small steps, getting it out there a little bit, and more people read that. And I can't tell you how many times I've read something on a blog or an article that I've then got my wheels turning, and then I've used that information for one of my stories. So you don't always have to get the big one, the big people to notice you. Sometimes it's small efforts, smaller people who can expose you and do wonders for whatever it is that you want to get out there.
I've got to echo that. I mean, you go hyper-local. Get your stories out in the smallest places that will hear your story and articulate it for you in the best way. Because then you have a link to send to somebody at the LA Times. I know when we're looking for stories at MSNBC and NBC News, we always go local or hyper-local to get the view on the ground. And then we extrapolate that which is extrapolatable on a national level. So, for instance, we did a story on the Mikado. That was because of an op-ed written in the Seattle Times. Would have never known about the Mikado and how it is yellowface. We were the only broadcasting network to do that story, but it's because we went local to understand how it's national. So when you're getting out there, and again, just hitting that same nail on the head here, as David has said, go really local, because then you have somebody that says, that's a great dish.
And we monitor, we're always looking for stories, so we are monitoring all these different sources from local magazines to blogs, etc., looking for the next big story. So we will see it eventually. You just have to kind of get it out there a little bit, and we'll eventually find it.
So to the panel, you're sitting with that in your editorial meeting, whatever it is, whatever it looks like, whether it's you and your partner, you and your managing editors, whatever the case may be. What is that like? Because that's where you're deciding you're getting your assignments or you're pitching. What is that environment like so that we can take them into that pitching space?
Very competitive and very intense. They have morning meetings at 7 a.m., I believe. It's been moved up early, and then later on after 10, and then later on in the afternoon. And there's different editors, people deciding what goes on page 1, people deciding what goes on the cover of the California section with news up and down the state, and then the covers of the individual sections like sports, business, lifestyle, that sort of thing, calendar. If you're pitching something, it's helpful to make sure that the reporter you're pitching to really understands the significance of the story and why it's so timely, because you only have the attention span of these top editors. It's just a few minutes, and if there isn't something that grabs them, they move on to the next topic. But I really like David's point point of going small, let me just add something really quick. Also, try to think of local ethnic newspapers or ethnic media in any platform. A lot of times, they have the luxury of giving you a lot of personalized attention. You'll be the top story of the day or the top story in that section. You're gonna get more column inches, you're gonna get more time on a broadcast, and the best thing is you'll get more images, you'll get visuals, photos. That's what draws people into a story. The faces, the images.
So when you walk into those meetings, and are you saying, do you have these up on the screen behind you in your meetings, like at least on the projector? Like, is it up there like this, and you're looking to see what's being moved around through every meeting? I've been to a couple, like the Washington Post. They've got this mocked up, sitting up on the wall in their morning, afternoon, and evening, or I should say late afternoon, editorial meetings. Do you also have the LA Times? And you guys are watching to see what's moving up and down, at least on above and below the fold on each page?
Actually, anyone is welcomed into the meetings. You can bring guests, but honestly, reporters don't go to the meetings a lot. You have your section editor representing what you're pitching, and they pitch the top stories of the day. And we have a centerpiece, which is the main story of the day with a big dominant visual.
It's not like
there's
this.
side
Like this
stories. Exactly like this. And then there's side stories and then stuff below the fold. But as long as you get on the cover, you get a lot of attention. But still, you have to remember the online component. Not everyone lives in our distribution area. Not everyone lives in a specific market, like San Francisco. Everything goes online, so they can scroll through the stories, and still you'll get eyeballs to your story, right? They could be from anywhere on earth, and that's ultimately what matters, the clicks.
What's your editorial process like? What's the discussion for you guys when you're going through the day or the cycle, whatever your cycle is?
For me, it's more of an instinctive thing. I feel like I judge everything according to what I find interesting. And I feel like if I find it interesting, then I'm going to be able to steer the story to make the audience think it's interesting as well. If I don't find it interesting, obviously I'm not going to do the story. However, you also get a gauge on what the issue is, what the topic is. And we have specialists in our newsroom. You know, like we have a car specialist, we have a consumer specialist, I have a fitness specialist. So if I see information that I find interesting, but maybe it doesn't quite fit something that I would put on the air, then I'll forward the email, or I'll email one of our reporters and say, I think this would be a really good story for you. In fact, I just I saw a picture of this. I don't know who's into yoga out there, but I saw this picture of this dual yoga thing now that's becoming interesting.
Duo?
Like dual, yeah, two people. It's like couples now do it together, where there's yoga poses where you actually need a partner to do it with. You know, you're climbing all over each other and doing all this craziness. But you know,
Sure, it's yoga.
interesting. It is yoga.
Right?
They were fully clothed, or at least mostly clothed. And so, but I did send it to my our fitness person, because you know, she's always looking for something unique and new. And you know, when you cover something very specific like fitness, it's really tough to find that thing that's really, truly unique and new that people haven't seen before. And this is one thing, I hadn't seen it before, so I sent it to her, and she's like, I haven't seen it before either. So she just did the story a few days ago. But so I'm always constantly scouring, and even if I don't find it interesting, I will send it to somebody who might find something out there or be better versed at putting that on the air.
And we're all friends, you know, we hang out and we give each other ideas. Sometimes it doesn't work for a newspaper or our online website. Sometimes maybe our bosses aren't interested, like I mentioned before, at that specific time, and I'll email it to David.
Yeah.
Actually, when you were both talking, I thought of something that I think is really important, is to know the medium. And there's a lot more blurring now with everything kind of being online at some level, but like with the things that David was talking about, I was thinking about, man, that has to be a very visual, like the dual yoga, that's perfect. It's very visual. Like for me as a blog, I mean, sure, I can embed video, that's great, but that's not necessarily the focus. What I'm doing, I'm looking for things that are more long form, things that are text-based. I think that's frankly, that's the advantage of doing a blog. I have no limit on inches. You know, I'm not fighting with anybody. So in terms of our editorial, we're a little bit different. We're not a traditional newsroom. We're in fact kind of a virtual newsroom. I serve as editor-in-chief, but I started out actually just as a writer. And because we're all over the place, literally all over the world, we cannot meet, like, you know, we have to do our stuff asynchronously. So there's some editors, I think there's 4 of us now who meet about once a month to really go over high-level stuff. But each person has their own section of things that they're responsible for. We have somebody who does books, we have somebody who does events.
They're autonomous.
Yeah, and they're autonomous, but we come together at a high level
Right.
once a month just to coordinate. We have, over the course of time, you know, arranged the schedule. Every Monday you'll see about travel. You know, every Friday we have our Asian American Commercial Watch. If you have the crowdfunding pitches, it comes out on Sunday. So we have our own internal calendar, and you can do your own homework to figure out things like this. You can see, like, the sections look like a certain way in the LA Times. You can just keep looking at it and be like, oh, I see a pattern of how they do this. And you can see, like, oh, you know, and maybe it's not as specific as the way that we do it, but you can learn by kind of doing your homework to really know the medium. So when they were talking, you know, I was thinking, oh, the things that, I mean, there's things I think we'd all be interested in, but there's some certain things that'd be really good for broadcast piece.
Yeah, that's totally true. And you know, I've been pitched great stories that I absolutely love, but let's say it's something historic. The first thing I'm going to ask is, what are the visuals on this? Do you have photos? Do you have film? Because if you don't have it, then I can't do the story, unless it has a great deal of expense, which is, you know, it's probably cost prohibitive then. But you know, because then you're reduced to having to use illustrations, get an artist, do reenactments, stuff like that, which we wouldn't do realistically in news. So you need the visuals. If it's something really, really visual or moves, and you have the pictures, you have the video, you have the film, then we can do it. But if it's something that is there are no visuals attached to it, then I'm kind of messed up, and then you have to go to somebody who can actually write it and create it through words.
Yeah, I can't stress the visual element enough, because do you know how many times we get invited to cover conferences? I just opened my email last night and this woman said, I read your story on the giving circles and could you come cover our symposium? And it was focused on soybeans. And I thought, my gosh.
How does that come together? Soybeans and giving circles.
But that's
Not
where
sure.
personalizing a story works. That's where you find the individual who has that great story that's attached to that, whatever the conference is, whatever the symposium is.
But the word symposium is kind of scary,
Yeah.
right?
I like soybeans, though. Soybeans is interesting.
Yeah, that's friendly and healthy. But how are we going to find anything to illustrate our story with at a symposium? Our photographer would have to sit for hours just to wait for the panelists to be animated or, you know, scream or roll their eyeballs. But, you know, you have to think, like, what is it really? You don't need coverage for a symposium. If it's a special topic, play up the topic and figure out why that's crucial to the audience.
Yeah. And I'm going to get down to what the three of you are intimating, which is, how do we get the materials to you so it's easiest for you to do what you do, which is tell stories, and which all three of you are definitely pointing to. But I wanted to go through our editorial process quickly. At 30 Rock, what used to happen 2 years ago, just those 2 years ago, you'd come in, whether it's a 4 a.m. show or an 8 p.m. show or a 2 o'clock in the afternoon show. There would be piles of newspapers, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, International Business Times, the Washington Post, delivered at 3:30 a.m. We got copies of it before anybody else does in the country. It arrives, it's delivered upstairs, it sits as you walk in, you pull the copies, you go sit down at the editorial meeting, and then you talk about what stories you want to put on TV 6 hours later, based on what's above the fold and what might be below the fold. Also, during that process 2 years ago, we would check our email, and we'd also look at our Twitter. We'd check our Twitter, and we'd all sit there in this room, let's say there's like 8 of us, and we would barely even look at each other. We'd just be going through, you know, our accounts, going, okay, so there's this above the fold. I just got this tweet from a journalist from the Washington Post or Politico that said blah, 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 blah. Great idea, great angle, good 140 characters. Let's go with that. That's going to be in the B block or the C block. That was 2 years ago. Now I walk in 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah, I do sleep in late now. And those newspapers are untouched. We do not pull them anymore. They're not in the editorial meeting anymore. And so it is now shifted in terms of what we know in our brain and what we're getting non-hard copy. And so that's what we go through for every show. I mean, there are some who do bring the newspapers in, but I gotta tell you, the piles are sitting high now, and I was just noticing that the other day. We're just not pulling them the way we used to. I still do, I'm old school, because I love...
You're looking at them online, right?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But see, the beauty of this is when you sit in that meeting, this is for 24 hours. And you have like 400 years of experience deciding what's going to be here for the next 24 hours. I love that. I know there's some importance behind it. I also go online, certainly, to see what is that hour or what is relevant on my Twitter handle. But that's sort of like the evolution of the way we're arcing, at least in broadcast news. And that was somewhat surprising to me. Now I'm going to ask all of you to pitch shortly. And I'll just point to, you all have stories, I know you do, so I want you to pitch to our experts, and then we'll break out for a little while so you can really get 1-to-1 or 1-to-5 with these good folks. And I'm sorry to get stuck with that guy at the end. Doesn't know what he's doing. No, I'm joking. But I want to understand, you were talking about what you want. So you get that email or that contact, and you were saying you wanted certain things, right? You were talking about visuals, you were talking about visuals as well. What's that perfect package? Does it need to look just like this? Like, here you go, here's the story, it's got all the video, it's got all the headline for you and everything. Does it have to have, one of my producers at Nightly News said, I want in your pitch to have the chyron. The chyron is that thing at the bottom. I want you to provide 3 chyrons so that I know what it looks like.
Well, for me, it's just a combination of a lot of different things. And sometimes it's just, I can't even tell you what's going to make me interested or what's going to grab my attention outside of the first couple of lines and a great description of somebody and some individual story. But I will say, in light of what Richard just pointed out, what we are doing locally in Los Angeles, and I found out here in San Francisco, they're doing something similar. We have started a new hashtag called ABC7 Eyewitness. And on this hashtag, we monitor.
There you are. You really have a job.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
You really have. David actually does work.
I'm actually the guy in the suit. So, with a tie on. Well, I don't want to, I'll spare you from having to watch this, but this is a story from this ABC7 hashtag. And it's kind of a brilliant idea and a painful idea at the same time, because we're not quite sure how we feel about it. Managers love this because they're starting to build out our show with a lot of these ABC7 Eyewitness. In other words, you put that hashtag on your tweet, send it out, and if it has that hashtag ABC7 Eyewitness, we'll look at it and we will decide whether or not this is a good story. And it could be something like, my buddy needs a kidney. Or it could be, my dog ran away. It could be anything. It could be a vet who needs some help. But we are grabbing them and we're finding them and we're putting, and then we advertise this. And we say, this story, thanks to, this story sent to us by a new ABC7 Eyewitness, who put on ABC7 Eyewitness hashtag on his or her tweet. They're doing that here in San Francisco at KGO with the hashtag ABC7Now. We're Eyewitness News down in LA. They're not Eyewitness News up here in San Francisco. They are ABC7 Now. So if you put that hashtag on a story that you want to promote and put that hashtag on it, KGO, the ABC station here, will look at it and make the determination on whether they can cover this or not. And but they're really emphasizing social media now as a way to really reach out to everybody. So everybody in the world can pitch a story basically to us by just having a Twitter account.
And to that point, maybe this is too much information, but why not? It's only 20 of us. We are neurotic. We're journalists. We look at everything that's tweeted at us. So you, as pitching a story, don't do it every day or every hour. But we may not respond, but we are watching our Twitter accounts. So if you tweet something at us, you may not hear anything, you get no like, you get no RT, you don't get any reply. We do see it though. And that,
Even if it's at midnight, right?
even if it's at midnight, right? It's the next morning, at midnight, what have you, we're looking at that. No matter whether it's national or local. Don't do it too much because we'll get upset. But it works. To your point about social, let's watch this though. Since you
All right, we can watch part of the intro, and then I'll spare you from to watch the whole piece. But you probably could.
That is an example of how a story we shared with the thanks to hashtag ABC7 Eyewitness has truly come full circle.
A 5-year-old girl who has battled cancer is having her dream come true tonight thanks to Eyewitness News viewers. An Orange County Bureau Chief Eileen Frere shows us how.
We're gonna get to see Adam tonight. You're welcome.
Esperanza Duran, also known as SP, is seeing part of her wish come true. She and her family just scored tickets to see Maroon 5 in concert in Anaheim.
I got so excited. I want to see them.
The 5-year-old, diagnosed with stage 3 kidney cancer last year, is now in remission. She says Maroon 5 helped her through chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. She loves the band so much, she even performed one of their songs at a talent show. When she heard Maroon 5 was in town, her family posted her plea on our ABC7 Facebook page. What happened next shows the power of the circle of eyewitnesses. Last weekend we aired Duran's story, and that was posted to our ABC7 Facebook page. That caught the attention of American Honda and the Honda Center.
I couldn't even fathom having to go through what SB's been through, what that family has been through. So to make this dream come true for them was just, it fills my heart, it makes me feel good.
Now, with tickets in hand, Duran hopes to see the other part of her wish materialize, to sing Sugar with Adam Levine.
Just 5 minutes. I'm not asking for any more. And just for her to meet the man that's helped get her through all this would mean the world to our whole family.
The little girl who loves superheroes, whose motto includes never give up, still holds out hope she'll meet her superhero, Adam.
We just gotta hope that maybe he'll hear from somebody or he'll see something on it.
In Anaheim, Eileen Frere, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
Well, the story was sent to us using the hashtag ABC7 Eyewitness. Remember, if you have a great story idea, send to us using that hashtag. When you see breaking news, you can do the same. Thanks for being a part of our circle of eyewitnesses, and I hope she gets to meet Adam Levine first. That'd be fun.
He's the type of guy. He'll drop by and say hi.
That'd be
I'm
nice.
sure it'd be important.
So we did a number of stories on this because this kept going, and Adam Levine did see that story, and then he did hang out with her, and he invited her to be with him for the day. So she did get that wish, and we did that story as well. But that whole thing started with that simple hashtag ABC7 Eyewitness. So social media, as much as it's a real thorn in our butts sometimes, but it works. It does allow anybody to have a voice and to get your information out there. And I think ultimately, I know that managers would love to build the whole show just on that hashtag, ABC7 Eyewitness, or whatever the hashtag is for whatever's going on locally with your guys. But they would love to let people kind of dictate what they want to see on television through social media.
And HLN is trying to go that way.
I think the hashtags are a brilliant strategy. And when I said earlier that I don't respond to Twitter messages, I want to clarify that I don't respond to Twitter messages directed at multiple journalists at the same time. Because we want you to pitch us exclusively. We don't want to know that you're pitching 5 other people. That's a sure way for the reporters not to respond.
Yeah, I won't do a story if I know everybody else is going to have the story. I'll only do an exclusive. And so if you're sending this to everybody, I'm not even going to pay attention to it. It's just one of those things. Because it's such a competitive thing that we have. If you think this story is special, then go to somebody who will be able to do a good job with it. But if it's going to be the same story that everybody has on the air, then I don't want to have anything to do with it. Some stories obviously are big enough to do that, because you obviously see that all the time where everybody's covering the same thing. But if it's something really special that you're doing, then find that person that you think could do the story, contact that person, and give that person an exclusive. I'm working on one right now, a medical story that's highly unique with this couple. They contacted me and they promised to give me the exclusive on it. But they also did an interview with a local magazine, Thousand Oaks Magazine. And my assignment desk contacted me. It's such a weird circle of things, but they contacted me and said, David, here's a really cool story on this couple, and they have this unique disease. And I'm like, I've already shot that story. And then I had to call them and ask them cease and desist because they said, as a result of that article, every station in town called them. And I was like, this is an exclusive for us. So when I get the story on the air, then go ahead and do it with them. But exclusivity is very, very important.
Anybody else? Okay. Who wants to pitch? We've got 30 minutes.